In this video, I'm going to show you how I caught 65 points trading the NASDAQ futures this morning. So let's get right into the chart. So first thing first, I'm on the 4-hour chart and we are currently trading at all-time highs on the NASDAQ. So that is one thing to note. Buy side liquidity above us is limited to our recent high from Thursday of last week. So going into the New York session this morning, we had a few fair value gaps to note here. We had a 4-hour fair value gap here, right? This 4-hour fair value gap, bearish fair value gap, and we had a 4-hour bullish fair value gap, right? So we kind of had two valid fair value gaps, which generally when this is the case, it's very difficult to have great confidence in either direction unless there's additional confluences that you're using. So for me, going into the morning, I was potentially watching for a short or a long opportunity. I was open to either side of the market. So that is the 4-hour gaps that we had on our chart. So if we drop down to our lower time frames on 15-minute, you always want to pair your 4-hour PD arrays with an execution on the 15-minute time frame. That is the proper ICT time frame alignment. So you can see that going into the New York session, we had a few pools of liquidity. We had our Asia lows, which had gotten swept during London, right? So Asia lows were no longer a valid draw on liquidity. However, we did have our Asia highs still intact. So that was a potential draw on liquidity that I was watching if I was potentially looking for any shorts, right? Longs. And then we still had our London lows here, which were intact as well, right? This was the lows from the London session this morning. And then we had our previous day lows here. Although it was a holiday, this is still a valid draw on liquidity for the market to potentially draw into if it did want to go lower. So if we kind of fast forward this action, you can see the market did trade higher and then we kind of consolidated and then we came and swept our Asia highs at 8:15 in the morning. So you can see this high, Asia session starts at 8 p.m. Eastern. So you can see that high got swept there. And then from there, the market did trade lower. So at this point now, once Asia's high is taken, there is potentially a short opportunity if we can close below the series of candles that swept that Asia high, because we are trading inside of this 4-hour fair value gap. It has not been inverted on the 4-hour chart yet, so it is still a valid for a short opportunity. So looking at this, you could see that we had this potential change in state of delivery here, right? If these series of candles that swept this liquidity, if they get taken, right, these three candles, if this opening price gets closed below, that is a change in state of delivery in which now price could look to potentially retest that and continue lower. All right, so that's one thing I was watching for. But we have to also be careful because we had this as well, right? This was also a change in state of delivery to the bullish side, right? And the reason this is a valid change in state is because this series of candles is the candles that took our Asia session liquidity, right? Sell side liquidity. So from there, I'm watching now, if we close back above here and come to retest this opening price, then I'd potentially be looking to play long, right? However, one thing that I noticed once the market did close below this, right? Because now a short is valid at this point. If we retest it, we could potentially draw into these lows here. However, like I said, we have this change in state that's bullish. So what's keeping the market from coming lower, bouncing here, and then coming higher? What I noticed, I checked the S&P 500, and the S&P 500 had an SMT, right? Meaning that the high, this high, right? This high here was not taken yet on the S&P 500. I'm sorry, on the NASDAQ. While on the S&P 500, that same high from our overnight opening price, right? That high from the overnight opening was swept on the S&P 500. So that is an SMT divergence. In this case, it's a bearish one. So that kind of gave me a short bias going into this morning, right? I would very well have taken this long, and if there was not an SMT there, but because the NASDAQ hadn't taken out this high, while the S&P did take out that same high, this high here, right? This is our SMT. If we want to make sure we annotate it here, because the NASDAQ did not take out that high while the S&P did, that kind of gave me reasoning to lean short, right? So the market does, we do retest that, and then we come back and trade into this change in state of delivery, right? The market trades a little bit lower, and then ultimately when the market opens, we do get a rally into this change in state level here, right? And so I will show you what I was watching. Again, I only look to take trades on the 15-minute. I do not use the 1 minute. I only enter on the 15-minute. So I was watching for a retest of this level, stop loss below this price, targeting these lows here, which were at our London session lows, right? So that is the trade setup I was watching. So when the market opened, price did rally higher right into that level, and I entered here, right on this level here, right? And going back to the 15, because again, I only use that to show y'all here. Stop loss was above here, targeting this draw on liquidity. And actually this happened so quick. It took literally, this was a 4-minute trade. I got my take profit hit pretty much immediately. You can see this big wick, right? You see this big wick that is on the 15-minute, that hit my take profit pretty much immediately. So this trade essentially was a 4-minute trade, very easy trade. You can see we respect this change in state of delivery perfectly. We respect the midnight opening price, the true opening price, the true day opening price, right? Which is that midnight opening, right? And after we took out the previous session high, there's no reason to believe the market is going to return back to this high. We've already taken out the previous session high. So now I'm looking for us to draw from liquidity, buy side session liquidity into buy side Asia session liquidity into London session sell side liquidity, right? So that is essentially what I was watching for. And you can see like I said, we respect that change of state perfectly. It's not a coincidence. And then from here, the market, we do retest it again one more time. And we do ultimately begin to consolidate and then sell off here. So the market pretty much sells off strongly. And then we do reach into this previous day session liquidity. We sweep that. And then ultimately we do continue lower, right? So this ultimately ended up being a trade you could have milked a lot of this from, but honestly, this hit my target so quick, I was one and done. That put me at 100% return for the last 4 weeks on my account. So I will be doing a trade breakdown video breaking down all the trades I've taken over this last month to achieve a 100% return in the account I'm trading. And so I will be posting that soon. But you can see this was pretty immediately, right? I entered here right at the market open at 8:30. You can see we respect this level perfectly. Sells right into the sell side liquidity beautifully here. So this is exactly what I'm looking for every single day. I don't complicate it. I make it simple. I use 4-hour PD arrays and I use 15-minute execution. That is the time frame alignment I like to use. What you like to use, that's your business, but that's what I like to use. So that's pretty much all I got for y'all in this one. I will see y'all in the next one.